This is the Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Rebecca Larson, and this is Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. And today I'm very, very happy to welcome back a longtime friend, Susan Abernethy. Welcome back, Susan.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
I always tell people, we go so far back, to the beginning,
way back.
When I feel like I say this every time you're on the show, but every time I think about you, I lump you in with Tony Riches because you and Tony were the first two people to really welcome me into the community and wrap me under your wings and be like, here, let me help you along. And I feel like I have to say this publicly all the time, how appreciative I am and what a great mentor you've been to me over the years. And thank you, Susan, really.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I feel like it's my job to mentor people. So to spread the history around the world. So
yes. Well, you do such a great job at that. And I can't thank you enough for shaping me into the woman I am today. So thank you.
You're
okay.
welcome.
So today, speaking of women, I invited you on the show today because you have a book coming out on the 10th of January. I'm so excited. This one is called The Formidable Women Who Shaped Medieval Europe. And immediately I look at that title and medieval pops into my mind and I go, oh, we love medieval stuff on this show. We love talking about women. I'm very excited. This is a really different type of book considering your last one was on Catherine of Braganza.
Yes, because I just don't know. It just occurred to me that I was fascinated by this Burgundian history. And as I was working, I just kept finding more and more and more women. And so I thought, you know what, let's just do it and do something different.
Yeah. So what started this? What started you to find this interest in the Burgundian, that's a hard word to say, Burgundian court? What was that first thing that made you go, oh, I need to know more?
Well, I had discovered in looking at medieval English history, John of Gaunt, who was the son of King Edward III, had a daughter named Philippa, and he took her to Spain, or to Portugal and Spain, and married her to the King of Portugal, who was John I. And so that was where I kind of learned about, that I started working on Portuguese history. Well, then I happened to pick up a used copy of a book about Isabel of Portugal, who was Philippa's daughter. And she married Philip the Good, who was the Duke of Burgundy. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was 33 years old, by the way, which was kind of old for a medieval princess to marry.
Yeah.
So I read about her and I was fascinated by her because Philip really trusted her and he allowed her to rule while he was away at war or in France, And then she had a son named Charles the Bold. He was the last Valois Duke of Burgundy. And he's a really fascinating character. I would say he was slightly mentally ill, but, take it from there. So that's where I started looking at Philip the Bold, John the Fearless, Philip the Good, and Charles the Bold, and then all the women that were related to them.
I love how all these men had their nicknames like that. Why did they get I get it, they were the men, they were the men in charge, the rulers, and that's why they got the nicknames. I wish the women had nicknames like that, I can't even give you an example. Obviously Catherine the Great, if we look at Russian history, she got it, but I can't even think of another woman in history who got a name like that.
No, I can't either.
Yeah, that's too bad. We should start giving them nicknames, I think.
We should do Isabel the Good,
Very...
Duchess of Burgundy.
Why don't you tell me some more about her? Because she sounds absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, she, like I said, she was the daughter of King John I of Portugal and Philippa of Lancaster. And she was very close to her mother. And her mother kind of taught her about, England and English history. And she was very proud of that. In fact, when she was dying, she worked on a charter that she made that showed that Philip or her son Charles the Bold had a claim to the English throne through her. And also she had a lot of brothers, and she grew up with, all these brothers. And so she went out hunting with the brothers and, kind of took care of some of her younger brothers. She also was very good at accounting. And you don't hear about, these medieval women being good at
No.
accounting, but she was very good at accounting. And so when Philip the Good was off, at war, she would sit down with his accounts and go over them and find ways to raise taxes or, pay so and so or whatever. So she was really good at that. She was kind of a petite woman, very small, but she was very powerful.
You know what? I just had a realization here. I think when we met in person, when I was in Colorado, what was it 2020 or 2019? I don't remember. Were you working on this book at that time?
Probably.
Yeah, I seem to like this is all ringing a little bit of a bell, like some of the Portuguese stuff. I seem to recall you talking about it that time we closed down the
The
restaurant.
restaurant. Yeah. Well, I had finished Catherine, and I sort of had it on hold. And so then I started working on the Burgundian women. And so probably we did talk about it. And we probably talked about Portugal too, because
Yeah.
of Catherine.
Gosh,
Yeah,
that seems like forever ago now, doesn't it?
it does. It was before COVID, I'm pretty sure. So
Yes,
that
it
was,
definitely was before COVID. Yeah, anyway, I'm still like trying to think like when was it exactly? But I don't want to get off track here. I want to keep talking about these women. So you just mentioned one woman that stood out for you, but as you were researching and writing this, was there any other women who really stood out where I mean, obviously you have like over 30 women in this book, but
yeah.
were there other ones where you went, oh, wow, like this is an
Mhm.
amazing story?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many good stories in here. Um, my favorite, I just have to say this, my favorite was Catherine of Burgundy. And I know I just keep talking and talking about her, but she was the daughter of Margaret of Maille, who married Philip the Bold.
Mhm.
And he had four daughters that he married off into various houses that were surrounding the Burgundian Empire. And Catherine ended up marrying one of the Dukes of Austria, Leopold the Fourth. And this is something that I found really interesting is that several of the daughters, whenever they would be married off, the parents would keep them at home. Even though they were married, they would keep them at home because they were usually teenagers, young teenagers when they, were married. And so they kind of wanted to wait until they were a little more grown up before they went off to live with their husbands. Anyway, that's what happened to Catherine. And when she eventually went, she actually had a pretty good marriage with Leopold. But however, they didn't have any children,
Mm.
and he died early. But her father had refused to pay her dowry. And so she must have been so charming because she went to Leopold and she said, Leopold, Dad's not paying my dowry. Can you give me something that would give me some income? So he offered her the county of Ferret, which is, I think it's part of Switzerland now or Germany. Anyway, so she ruled Ferret on her own, basically. She had a couple of castles there. She acted as a diplomat for her husband, for her brother, and for her nephew, John the Fearless and Philip the Good. Um, she actually had the wherewithal to start a few little petty wars while she was ruling this little county. So I'm just really completely in admiration of her. And then she did something unbelievable. She knew this young man who was an Austrian nobleman named Maximilian Schmaschmann, and she wanted to make an alliance with him for political purposes. But I also think that she fell in love with him because he was probably pretty handsome.
Mm.
And she married him. And she didn't tell her brother that she was married. And John the Fearless got these letters from a couple of people saying, hey, your sister is married. It's an insult to us. So John the Fearless didn't really do anything. He didn't, I think that she really did marry him. It was kind of a like a hand fasting kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
not an actual marriage through the church. And so he kind of told her, just come home, Catherine, just come home. And so I think that it really was a true marriage. Well, by the time her nephew became the Duke of Burgundy, he didn't want her to be married to this guy anymore. He wanted to take over Ferret for himself. And so he kind of had the marriage annulled, so to speak. And I think she actually died of a broken heart after that because she lost her husband.
Oh,
But it's such a great story.
that is a great story. So, just to put it into perspective, when did she live?
She was born in like 1400, 1399, somewhere in there,
Okay.
and died in 1420, 33, 34, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you compare English women to these European women, it seems like the European women have always been ahead of the time.
Yes. Yes. And I also think that there's a pattern with the Burgundian dukes where they allowed their women to pretty much rule in their stead.
Yeah.
They had no problem with that. You know, they might not have had the official title of ruler or regent, but they ruled. So I think that that was a pattern that started under those dukes.
So you talked about marriage, and of course, I'm always fascinated by royal marriages. Was it different for them, versus the way it was in England? You know, when Margaret Beaufort got married at 12, that kind of changed things and how it shifted the age to be a little bit older for consummation. What did it
Mhm.
look like for these women? Were they young when they got married?
Yes, a lot of them, like a couple of these daughters of Philip the Bold, were engaged to their husbands when they were babies, basically.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes those marriages would go through, and sometimes they didn't. They would end up marrying somebody else by the time they'd grown up. But yes, they were married when they were very young, 12, 13, 14 years old. And like I said, I think that the mothers, the wives of the dukes, they didn't want to send their daughters off when they were that young. And so they stayed at home. I find it over and over again. You'll see it if you read
Smart.
the book.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is so smart moms. I love.
Yes. Yes, they protected their daughters for sure.
Well, it's good to see that they saw that that was a young age. Even though it was acceptable to be married, it's still young. I mean,
Well, and then the canonical age for consummation with the church was 12 for a woman. So it was, legal, so to speak, to have relations at that age. But of course, we all know, like Margaret Beaufort, it was dangerous.
yeah, and
And the mothers knew that.
leave it to a bunch of men in Rome to decide on when young girls can consummate their marriage.
Right.
What? Oh gosh. Okay, so was there any woman, maybe that we haven't discussed yet? There's so many to go through. We're not going to reach everyone today, but was there one woman that while you were researching and digging into these sources that really surprised you that maybe you didn't know about before?
Absolutely. One of my other favorites turned out to be Yolande of France. She was the daughter of King Charles VII and Marie of Anjou. And Marie of Anjou is also in the book. Her mother's in the book. She was the sister of King Louis XI. And speaking of marriage at a young age, at the age of 2, she was engaged to the future Duke of Savoy. He was called the Prince of Piedmont. You know how you have the King of England, the Prince of Wales, the
Yeah.
Duke of Savoy, and the Prince of Piedmont. And so she went to the Savoy court when she was a baby, basically, and lived there to learn the language and her culture and everything. And she was rather old by the time she became Duchess of Savoy. But what I really liked about her was there were several people that were trying to get control of Savoy at the time. Her brother was one of them, King Louis. Charles the Bold was another one. And then she had various brothers in law who, wanted more control. And when her husband died, her son was fairly young. And so she went to the estates of Savoy and she said, I want to be regent for my son. And they agreed because she had acted as pretty much regent for Savoy under her husband, too, because he was ill. He had epilepsy. And so they agreed to let her become the regent. And so she had to kind of keep all of these balls in the air between all of these different people that wanted control of Savoy. And she ended up being captured twice. First by one of her brother-in-laws, and then secondly by Charles the Bold, and was put into like a castle in prison and managed to escape twice. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. She was kept captive and escaped twice. And she ended up back in Savoy with total control in the end. And so for about the last 4 years of her life, she ruled in peace and was very much admired by the people of Savoy. So that was one story that I just was blown away by.
Wow, I love these stories of these women. I think we talk about this all the time about how women have been in the shadows of history for so many years. And I feel like there were also so many male historians just telling the stories of more men. And here we are now, and we're in the 21st century. And I feel like we hear about women so much more. I even had somebody complain on my YouTube channel one day that I talk about women too much. It's time to talk about men. And
No,
I was like, really? Haven't we been talking about men for centuries? Like,
exactly. Exactly.
it's
Yeah,
time. It's
it's
time.
totally time.
Oh my
And these
gosh.
women were actually ruling, you know, the men couldn't have done it without them,
Yeah.
basically. They could not have done what they did without the women behind them backing them up.
Yeah. You need a good partner and you need somebody who's maybe not exactly like you. Somebody who can look at things differently and be like, well, and let's be honest, women tend to be maybe a little bit more level-headed sometimes.
Exactly.
I'm going to get hate for that. I know
Probably.
I am. Oh, I'm so controversial, aren't I?
Yeah,
Were there any other stories like that jump out to you where you were really surprised during your research?
there was. There was a great granddaughter of John the Fearless. Her name was Marie of Cleves.
Mm.
And she ended up marrying the Duke of Orleans, Louis, the Duke of Orleans. And he was the one, or Charles, I'm sorry, Charles. He was the one that was captured by King Edward III during the Hundred Years' War. And
Okay.
he was a prisoner in England for many, many years. And while he was living in the Tower, he wrote poetry and, he was a very cultured man. And Isabel of Portugal managed to get him released from England and brought back to France. And part of that treaty was for him to marry this Marie of Cleves, one of the niece or great granddaughters of the dukes. And so he was rather old when he married her, and she was young. She was like 14 years old. Here we go again with the
Yeah. Yeah, I
young
was
marriages.
surprised.
And so she moved to France and she lived with him in all of his castles. And she didn't have any children for like 10 years.
Wow.
And so her husband is getting older and older and older and, you know, in less good health. All of a sudden, she's pregnant
Hmm.
and she has
Huh.
a daughter. And
I'm
she ends up
suspicious.
she ends up having two more children. And one of those was King Louis XII of France. So you
Oh,
see how all of this stuff is all
yes.
related. And I just thought that was really interesting that she didn't have any children. The thing is, I think that King Louis XI was kind of suspicious of her, but nobody ever said that Louis XII was not her son, or not Charles of Orleans' son.
Yeah.
So nobody questioned it. And so I really do believe that she did become pregnant by her husband. It just took a while. It took a long time.
It sounds like Catherine de' Medici and Henry II of France.
Yes. Yes. Another good example.
Yeah.
Or even Marie Antoinette and Louis the 16th.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just took some time and she finally did get pregnant.
Okay.
The thing was that she ended up being a poet just like her husband too. And she actually had a pretty good reputation for being charitable and devout and that kind of thing. So I thought that was a really good story too.
Oh my gosh, these are great stories. We were talking before the show about how your book is so good to digest, however it works for you.
Yes.
Like, I want you to explain it to people because I thought it was brilliant the way that you said it.
Yeah, I had somebody in one of the book reviews on the Pen and Sword website mention that she loved this book because she could put it on her coffee table and she could pick it up and just read, you know, one or two or three chapters because each one is it's relatively short, but you can just pick a woman and read about her at any time. You don't have to sit down and read the whole book.
Yeah.
The first chapter is basically a short summary of the kingdom or the Duchy of Burgundy and how it started and how it ended up, and then the first Valois Duke and how he started gaining territories and ended up by the time of Charles the Bold, the Duchy of Burgundy was about the size of England and Wales together. So that was
Oh,
fairly large.
yeah.
And it was mostly the Low Countries, parts of northern France, parts of Germany. And also, part of that gathering of those properties was through the women, through marriages. Um, there's a couple of women that were bullied and badgered by the dukes, to give up their patrimonies,
Of
especially
course.
Jacqueline of Bavaria. It's kind of a sad story, but she fought. She was real spunky and she fought.
Oh.
So, you can just pick up and read after that first chapter, just read about any of these women, and they're all great stories.
Oh, well, okay. You can't just drop Jacqueline of Bavaria and
Yeah,
mention how spunky she is without going into it. So I love feisty women, especially
me
medieval
too.
women who are feisty. These aren't 21st century women who can just say whatever they want. That was dangerous. So tell us about her. I want to hear this.
Right. She was actually a granddaughter of John the Fearless. Her mother was a daughter. And she married the Count of Holland and had Jacqueline of Bavaria. It was her only child. And so Jacqueline was the heiress to a huge amount of territory, Holland, Zealand, Oosterwont, Hainaut. And so Philip the Good was looking at this and going, hey, I I want that territory. And so she ended up having to like gather an army and fight, against him. And John the Fearless, before Philip the Good, had married her to one of his nephews. And that marriage didn't go well because he ended up, mortgaging her territory to someone. And so she was pretty mad about that.
Yeah, I'd say.
And so she tried to get a divorce but couldn't get it. And she ended up going to England and she married the brother of King Henry V, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester. He brought an army over and tried to get her territories back. And I mean, she did everything she could. However, he ended up having an affair with one of her ladies in waiting named Eleanor Cobham and left her stranded in the Low Countries and moved back to England and married Eleanor. So there's a few bits of bigamy here going on.
Yeah. Again, you could do whatever you want when you were a man.
Really? And then, so Jacqueline was left again alone. And Philip the Good took her prisoner. And she met a guy named Frank van Borsela, who was a part of the nobility of Holland, and fell in love with him. She wanted to marry him. And so Philip used this to get her to give up her territories. So she ended up giving him everything, making him the heir to all of her territories so that she could marry Frank. The sad part of the story is by the time she married him, she had tuberculosis
Hmm.
and she was only married for a short time. She finally found love and then she died.
Oh, that's so tragic.
It
I
is.
hate when stories end like that.
I know, but she was spunky. I mean, you got to admire the spunkiness.
Okay, so here's a big question, and I hope you can answer it with just one person, but if you can't, that's okay. Was there one figure that really stayed with you after you finished the book?
I would have to say that yes, yes. I wanted to do a chapter on Juana of Castile, the Queen of Castile. And I don't call her Juana la Loca. We don't say that.
No, no.
We don't say that. Um, and I really went into depth with her. She is actually the last woman in the book, the last chapter, because she was the Ersatz Duchess of Burgundy. By the time she married Philip of Burgundy, they didn't really own the Duchy of Burgundy because Louis XI had stolen it,
Hmm.
not stolen it, but taken it back to France. And so they kept the title of Duke and Duchess of Burgundy. So that's how she's related to the Burgundian court. But she was the sister of Catherine of Aragon, the daughter of Isabel and Ferdinand of Spain. Um, and everybody calls her Juana La Loca. And I wanted to know, was she really crazy? And no, she wasn't. Not initially, but she had grown up to where she was not supposed to be queen. She had an older sister, she had a nephew that was supposed to be the king and
Yeah.
queen of Castile. And so it was by default that she ended up being the Queen of Castile. And she either was unwilling or unable to rule. And at that time, you had to have the backing of the nobility, the church,
Yeah.
to rule. And she tried. She did try. There was a short period where she was on her own and she tried to get the support she needed, and it just didn't happen. And so first her father, and then her husband, and then her son, Charles, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. They wanted Spain, and they took it from her and they imprisoned her. And I think that being in prison for, I don't know, what, 30, 40 years, that's what made her crazy,
Yeah.
because it was a sensory deprivation. Like, she didn't have visitors. She was pretty much kept on her own. She wasn't allowed anything. And actually, she was beaten. At some point, she was beaten. So this is what made her crazy. When she went in there, she wasn't crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would
So
anybody would snap after that long in captivity.
exactly, exactly. And she kept going on and, requesting, I want to see my grandees. I want to see my position. I want to see the nobles. I want to see this. And they wouldn't let her. So she wanted to, attempt to rule as queen, but they just wouldn't let her. And I think that's probably the saddest story of all. I mean, when I think about it, I just want to cry about how they treated her.
Yeah.
So yeah, she really stuck with me a lot.
Wow. As you were telling that story, I couldn't help but see some parallels between her and Mary, Queen of Scots.
Hmm.
I
Yes.
I'd never thought of that before until you were just talking about it. Just like Mary
Hmm.
tried, she did. She tried to rule, uh,
She did.
but she didn't stand a chance either, did she?
She did not. No,
Wow.
and Juana didn't either. There was
No.
just too many powerful men, they had too much power over them.
Yeah. Those men. I'm telling you, I'm gonna get a lot of hate mail for this episode. Mostly from men, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at let's go back to marriages. How about we do that for a little bit?
Okay.
Because we've only
Okay.
just scratched the surface on marriages, but it really
Hmm.
is like a recurring theme with women, obviously, and the power that it brings or the
Yes.
power that it takes. And can you talk about maybe a woman's whose marriage was especially politically consequential?
Oh gosh, they all were. Um, but I'm going to have to start with Philip the Bold, who was the first Valois Duke of Burgundy. Um, his brother, the King of France, gave him the Duchy of Burgundy as a reward for being a loyal um, sidekick for him during the Hundred Years' War. And he actually went to prison with his brother in England. So when he came back, the king said, "Hey, I'm going to give you the Duchy of Burgundy." He wanted to merge the Duchy of Burgundy with the County of Burgundy, which was a little bit further north between the Low Countries and northern France. It's also called the Franche Comté. And to do that, he had to marry the daughter of the Count of Flanders, Margaret of Maille, because she owned the county of Burgundy and she owned Flanders, Rethel, Nevers, and a few other little territories. So I would say that had the most consequences because that's how he started the Burgundian Empire, you know, making it bigger.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, of all the marriages, then which one do you see as the most successful? And you can gauge success by whatever standard you want.
Well, I would have to say Isabel of Portugal. Um, the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Good, he had about 25 illegitimate children.
Oh, one of
So
those.
he was not a faithful husband. However, I think that because Philip allowed her to rule in his stead, and like I said, work on the accounting part, and she had a lot of power. She was probably one of the most formidable women in the book. So I would have to go with her.
That one.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. I'm trying to think here how much of this we've actually covered, but maybe there's so many women that maybe there are stories from different women that these will work out for too. Are there any women in the book whose reputations you think are misunderstood or unfairly
Yes.
shaped
Oh,
by later
yes.
historians?
Oh, oh, for sure. Uh, Anne de Beaujeu. Anne was the daughter of Louis the Louis the 11th, King of France, and Charlotte of Savoy. Charlotte is also in the book. Um, she started out as a child by her father's side. And if you know anything about Louis the 11th, he was called the Spider King
Oh,
because he he was a very diplomatic king and he had all of these little, plots going on all around. Like I said, he got the Duchy of Burgundy back at some point. Um, but she was by his side for many years and studied his methods. And in addition to that, she had kind of a school for young women, young noble women. And so there was a couple of women in the book that attended her school and learned diplomacy and how to govern. But the best part about her was when her father died, her brother was not quite 13 years old, and so he needed a regent. And Louis the 11th, he never actually gave her the title of regent, but he did give her and her husband um, the, the guardianship of the king's body, which is something that's kind of important in medieval history.
yeah.
So she ruled France for 8 years. She was the Queen of France. She didn't have the title, but she ruled France. And her greatest legacy is that she wanted to annex Brittany. Brittany was a separate duchy. She wanted to annex that to France, and that's what her legacy is. She started that process. It didn't actually happen until the reign of Francis I, but she's the one that got control of it by having her brother marry Anne of Brittany, who was the Duchess of Brittany at the time. You see where the women come in?
Yes, so
So
important.
yeah, I would say she is probably one of my favorite women that even before I wrote the book, she was one of my favorites. Um, Another one who she has a great reputation. It's not like nobody knows about her, but Margaret of Austria, who was the granddaughter of Charles the Bold, she ruled the Netherlands as regent
Yeah.
for the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. And she did a great job. I mean, she was one of the best rulers of the time. So she's another one that's really a standout.
Yeah, I love her story. I think she is absolutely amazing. We talk a lot about her on Dr. Emma and Me, and we call her one of the original marketing mothers because
Yeah.
she knew. She was so smart.
Well, she was under Anne de Beaujeu. She studied under
Mm.
her because she was married to Anne's brother. Well, when she was 8 years old, I don't know, something ridiculous. She lived in France for many years, and then he ended up marrying Anne of Brittany, so she had to go home. Then she married Catherine of Aragon's brother, Juan,
Yeah.
as you say. Then she married the Duke of Savoy. And then there was talk of her marrying King Henry VII of England.
Yes.
But
Yes.
she went to her brother and she said, no, 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 no. You're not going to marry me off another time.
Good
And
for
so,
her.
yeah, that she, and while she was in Spain, after her husband died, she lived there for 2 years. So she learned under Isabella of Castile.
Yeah.
So she had all this background, which served her well as governor of the Netherlands.
I think there needs to be a TV series or a movie about her. I think there's enough there to be able to write something like that.
Plenty, plenty. Absolutely.
So if you're watching or listening right now and you're a screenwriter, just take that piece of advice.
Exactly.
One of the other women that you talk about that most everybody is going to recognize the name, it's Jacquetta of Luxembourg.
Uh-huh.
And I think, we know her as Elizabeth Woodville's mother. But aside from that, who was she? Where did she come from?
She was the daughter of a nobleman, and they could trace their ancestry back to Melusine, this mythical goddess anyway. Um, what happened was uh, Philip the Good needed a wife for John, Duke of Bedford, who was the regent of France. This was during the Hundred Years' War. They had a treaty that said that King Henry V would be king of France, or his son would be king of France. But while Henry VI was a young baby, he couldn't rule. So
Okay.
the Duke of Bedford was the regent of France. Philip the Good married Jacquetta to John, Duke of Bedford. This was a very successful marriage, actually. They didn't have any children, but they both enjoyed culture. Um, he commissioned the Bedford Book of Hours, which is actually, I think it's in the British Library right now. It was given to Henry VI at some point. Um, and they lived in Normandy for part of the time that she was married to him. And then he died. But in the meantime, she had met Richard Woodville, who was stationed at Calais at the time. And so when the Duke died, she married Richard Woodville.
Yes.
And she didn't have permission to do that.
What? Gosh, this
Shame,
sounds
shame.
familiar.
Yes. And I think that Henry VI, he didn't mind that they were married, but he extracted a 2,000 pound fine,
Whoa,
for the marriage. So
that was a lot of money back
it was a
then.
lot of money. But she actually had a lot of uh, properties in France. And then when she moved to England, she had property there too. So yeah, she's a very interesting character. She was supposedly very beautiful, um, and very forceful personality, I would say. She's one of the ones that was at the secret wedding of
Yeah.
Elizabeth Woodville and Edward IV. So she had some
Wow.
power. She definitely had some power.
Can we talk about Luxembourg? Because I feel like that's a country we don't really talk about. And I discovered part of my family came from Luxembourg. And it's tiny. It's like this tiny little country mixed in amongst all of these other ones.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. There's actually a chapter on Elizabeth of Gorlitz, um, because Philip the Good badgered her into giving him Luxembourg. And
oh,
so that's a really great story. She was related to the Holy Roman Emperor and the kings of Bohemia and Poland. And um, she married very young. She had a couple of miscarriages, and then she was married to John of Bavaria Straubing, who was one of she was a, he was an uncle of Jacqueline of Bavaria, actually. Then when he died, um, she ended up ruling Luxembourg on her own. Luxembourg named her the governor of Luxembourg. However, she was a gambler. She liked to spend a lot of money.
uh-oh.
So she ended up in debt. And so Philip saw his opportunity and he said, I'll pay your debts
Mm.
if you name me the heir to Luxembourg.
Oh
And
man.
he did have his mother, or his great great grandmother was actually from Luxembourg. So he did have like a hereditary claim.
Okay.
So did a lot of other people, by the way. But, and so she did. She named him her heir. And that's how he ended up annexing Luxembourg into the Burgundian Empire. But so there's a whole chapter on her. She's a very interesting character.
Okay, if you guys haven't realized yet, this book covers a lot of historical ground.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot. Well, I feel like, gosh, we've covered so much. I want people to buy your book. So I don't want to obviously talk about every single person that you wrote about.
Right, right. We'll have
Um,
to keep some surprises here.
that's right. I'm trying to think about how we can wrap this up, and not rehash what we've already gone over. How about we end? No, I have a different one before we end. Um,
Okay.
I don't, this is my thought process, you guys. If you had any idea what goes on in my brain on any given day or during any interview, it's just a mess. There's constant thoughts and anyway. Um, do you see a particular woman whose influence extended beyond her own lifetime? Maybe like through daughters or nieces or a dynastic legacy? I know it's a big question, but
It really is. But, it has to be Juana of Castile because, um, she married the Duke of Burgundy, and then her son was Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. And I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about his influence on Europe
yeah.
for sure. Um, yeah, that would be the one that would have and also that's how the Empire of Burgundy ended. Is once he took over, they became part of the Habsburg Empire.
Mm,
So
yeah.
that's when the Valois dukes their whole empire, was absorbed into the Habsburg Empire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would have the biggest dynastic consequences.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Because if you look at Charles V and all of his children and what they went off to do and their children, it just
Yes.
continues.
Like didn't one of his daughters marry, or one of Juana's daughters married the king of Hungary or something? I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
That's why the book title is Who Shaped Medieval Europe, because, it covers all of Western Europe, basically.
It's such a big topic, but you clearly found so many common themes in these women's lives, didn't you?
Absolutely. That was one of the really interesting things. The Dukes of Burgundy paid huge dowries for all of the marriages. They kept their daughters at home until they felt like they were old enough to marry. There's just all these different consequences. And so many of these women are duchesses or countesses,
Yeah.
of different areas. So, yes, there's a lot of continuity within it.
Yeah.
But then each woman is unique, a unique story.
Yeah, that's the thing about people, isn't it? Like I often look at historical figures from a different perspective these days, because it's almost like they're almost one-dimensional when we just read about them, right? But when you sit back and you look at the broader scope of their lives and you realize everything that they went through, they were human, just like us. You know, they had flaws. There's great things that they did that people don't talk about enough. It, yeah.
Yeah. That's what the great things is what's in this book is some of the great things that some of these women did. And
Yeah.
and I should mention Sharon Jansen's book, The Monstrous Regiment of Women. She talks about these women in early modern Europe, medieval and early modern Europe. And she says that we need to look at the family trees. You know, when you look at family trees now, you see the man, and you occasionally see the woman as the wife or the daughter, if the daughter married somebody important. But we need to look at the trees from the women's relationships.
Yeah.
And so that has changed my whole perspective and really helped me in writing this book. I can go, oh, this is the granddaughter or the great granddaughter of this woman, you know, as you keep going down. And you also discover all these other women as you keep going. But I think we
Yes.
need to start looking at the family trees a little bit differently.
Oh, I love that. As a genealogist, you know, I appreciate a good family tree, but you're right. The focus is always on the paternal side. Always.
Yes, always.
Yeah, that needs to end. As of
There's
today.
there's actually some family trees in the back of the book too that show, you know, the different relationships.
I need to get a print copy of this book because I just have a digital copy and it's just not the same. Like
It's not.
I love holding a book. I love being able to put little stickers. Yes, it's so beautiful too. They did such a great job on that cover.
I love because three of the wives are on the front, and then Margaret of York is on the
I
spine.
I
So,
love that so much. Okay. So we'll wrap it up with this question, and maybe we've kind of answered it already, but what do you think these women collectively force us to rethink about medieval politics and power?
oh yeah, that's a great question because, you know, I think that when we look at these women or these queens or these duchesses or these countesses, we don't really see how important they are. To the men in their lives and how the men could not do what they did without somebody at the, you know, at home. Um, yeah, I just don't think that we give them credit for what they actually were able to do. And I want to say that the Dukes of Burgundy were really special in that they allowed their women to have this power in their hands, you know, and we need to like bring this out into the open and shine a light on it because we just don't see it when we look at the family tree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about this book. And why don't you show the book again so everybody can see it? The Formidable Women Who Shaped Medieval Europe. What's the subtitle again?
Power and patronage at the Burgundian court.
There you go. And this is available, well, it's available for pre-order now, but as of January 10th, you can get it everywhere, right?
At all your favorite booksellers, yeah, and you can actually get it from Blackwell's now, and they'll ship it to the U.S.
Perfect. I'll include those links in the show note too. And I also want you to have the opportunity to plug your website because that is a treasure trove of people. That's the only way I know how to describe. You've been writing this website for so long, and there are so many figures from history in it.
Yeah, I started the freelance history writer, all one word, back in 2012. Originally, I was, you know, writing about women, but then I threw a few men in there too. So it covers medieval, early modern, mostly England, France, the Low Countries. I have a good bit of Burgundian history on there, some Spanish and Portuguese history. Yeah, there's over 500 articles on there on
Just a
different
couple.
topics. Yeah, yeah. I
I will.
left it open. When I started it, I said, I'm going to leave it from ancient times until I was born. So I can write on
Smart.
anything I want.
That
Yeah.
was such a smart move. I made the mistake from the beginning, pigeonholing myself into Tudor's dynasty only, and then realized I'm interested in everything. So that's where the and beyond came. A little late, but it came.
Right.
I think once you're interested in history, and maybe especially royal history, you tend to go in both directions of whatever your
Sure.
initial passion is, don't you?
Yeah, because like you learn about, like I learned about King Edward III and John of Gaunt, and then his daughter married the King of Portugal. So now you have to study Portuguese history, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
That's the joy of the wormholes, the rabbit holes,
Rabbit
that you
holes. It's so easy to go down those rabbit holes.
but it's so fun too, isn't it? Because you just never know
Hmm.
what you're going to discover. It might set you back a few days on your research, but
Definitely.
we have all been there. Well, Susan Abernethy, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about these wonderful women.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm happy to talk history anytime.
Thanks for listening to Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tutorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Join the conversation with Rebecca on social media at Tudors Dynasty. Until next time.